And Angela also contributed wonderfully to the symposium we organized at MIT in 2014, Public Space Lost and Found. That was also the symposium dedicated to the retirement of Professor Nutalius, and he still continues in Iuav. So he always had one foot at MIT and another foot at Iuav, sparing his time between the many countries and continents. Yeah. So thank you, Angela, for joining us, and thank you also for Iuav and Angela also being a partner, being wonderful partners in this effort of this whole school. So please now join me in welcoming Angela.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Can you hear me? Do I have to take the mic? It's better. We will start by having a look to what the lagoon is now, keeping in mind that the lagoon is not a normal swamp. I mean, it is a swamp, but swamp can be said in very different ways, and it was chosen because it is a lagoon. It was not by chance that people started living here and created a powerful republic here. The presence of the water was the basis of the power of the town, and the basis somehow also of the, on one hand, control that the people had on the side of the power, but also the services on the other hand that the people had on the side of the republic. But let's go on and have a look to these images that were taken during a tour by boat by a Iuav master in photography led by artist Amedeo Rattegani, and you can see how the majority of the spaces look now completely abandoned, destroyed, ruined, and the nature is taking advantage of what used to be basically fortresses, places for of soil who was coming and to protect the lagoon itself. And somehow all the fortresses have been abandoned because they do not have any meaning anymore, but they were actually the most important part of the buildings in the lagoon. And you have this mixture between water and grass that was not like that when these little islands were really useful. So we will see that in other places the buildings, this is San Clemente, the buildings have been transformed into something else. San Clemente, for example, is an island that was a place for the hospital for mad people but not dangerous. And it has been transformed recently in a very luxurious resort where you have to go by a car, electric car. And here many of the structures that used to be showing the power of the Republic are still possible to be seen. And of course, a big part of these constructions were churches. So there is also this flavor of the sacrum, let's say. Ceilings, painted ceilings, in a strong contrast to what is now the place, like a place for basically an SPA, Salus per Aquam. Venice has always had a very strong thermal tradition, so they recently forgot about that, but there is a plan to keep it away, to keep it again, to start again in this tradition. So you see the difference with the other. I mean, how much care has been taken in restoring San Clemente. And you also have, I want to go back, you also have these places that resemble pharmacies. Venice was a place with more than 200 pharmacies, because this was the place where many herbs used to arrive by boat. So there was a tradition, and there was in particular a certain medicamentum that was called teriaca, which was based on opium and was actually healthy for everything, apart from the fact that when opium was taken away, it became useless. But still, you see that these are places where still people can have jobs. It's a part of Venice that still gives people the way to work. And there are other places where people fish. So places for fishing. We are going back to another abandoned or semi-abandoned island. There is a habit for Venetian people now to buy a piece of an abandoned island, and what normally would do a Milanese during the weekend would be go to the Alps. And a Venetian can go to the Alps, of course, to the Dolomites, but he can also go in island, they say. So they go and grow vegetables in these abandoned islands where they construct or reconstruct little houses like the one you are seeing here. So it's a way to bring the countryside in a place where the countryside basically does not exist. There is a sort of nostalgia for nature, and in particular for the country areas in the Venetian area, and so this is a way to protect. So what you see now are the bricolas. What is this? I mean, bricola is a structure with three woods, one linked to the other, and they are not ornamental. They are signs that give directions to those who arrive to the lagoon, those who circulate by boat in the lagoon, because the lagoon is not a normal swamp. It has canals inside, in places where the water is much deeper than wherever else. So in case you do not know how to navigate and you do not have signs that helps you to navigate, you're lost. Basically, you end stuck in the mud. And this is what saved Venice, because all the thieves, all the pirates, or those who wanted to come and conquer Venice were stopped by taking away the bricolas. So nobody knew how to circulate and how to arrive to the main island. And the only time where this did not happen was with Napoleon, who was betrayed. I mean, Napoleon was not betrayed. He knew how to pay to let the Republic enter him. So this means that the Republic was already dying, actually. I think it's interesting, at least, to have a glance on this kind of landscapes that are not so well known, because unfortunately Venice is a paradigm for mass tourism. But of course you can witness here the solitude and the silence that is part, a consistent part, a continuous part of the lagoon itself. And also wonderful architecture like this is are completely left. And I must say that neither the artists are normally looking at these parts. I mean, for a normal biennial, nobody would take one of these islands into consideration, because it is so far away and it requires the use of a boat. And so, of course, there are people working there. This is a net for fishing, and fishing is part of the economy of the town. But also, in these hidden places, we have industrial or semi-industrial structures. So something that wouldn't be allowed in the main island. So this kind of rough way to keep up the structure would not be allowed here in the middle of Venice. I hope it is not boring, but somehow it makes sense to show you what has taken a lot of energy to be built and now is like an unconscious part of the town itself that stays like a basis for the fortune of the town, but is not taken care by the municipality, for example, or by other authorities. And you see the mixture of the vegetation, which is half a vegetation that comes from the earth, and from another half, a vegetation which comes from the sea. So, salty vegetation, and of course, other kind of stuff, like, for example, sofas, abandoned sofas. So, and this is, of course, what happens with the mud, what happens with the algae. But what is really relevant to underline is that Venice was always conceived as being protected by the water, as if the water was a wall. So the mechanism actually through which Venice survived was not different from the mechanism through which Siena or Florence or Milan survived. I mean, there was a circle of walls, and this circle of walls was made out of water. So if we go and see another series of images, we can see that from the very beginning, the Venetian, the representation of Venice itself was like a main island with, you see, like a sort of a circular protection. Within this circular protection, you have several islands, and every island has a function, has a special function. So we have, for example, San Clemente, as I told you, was the place for mad but not dangerous people. San Servolo was the island for mad but criminal people. Then we had the Lazaretto Vecchio, where were taken all the people whose illness was impossible to be cured, who die in a more or less short time. And that was a way to take away the pest from the town itself. Another island that was called Lazaretto Nuovo, because in that place there were not ill people, but all the boats that would come from abroad had to stay there for a while, for 40 days, basically, to wait for the food, goods, and also people in order to see if there was something wrong, like rats, like ill people, like something that was not meant to enter the main island. And so we have the invention, the invention of words is really always meaningful, and not by chance, we have the words lazaretto and the words quarantine that were invented here in Venice because the function of waiting or having a place where to put everybody just to observe them were invented here. And so it's also interesting to see how, little by little, the sense of unity between the main island and the lagoon went lost. It got lost little by little, as I told you. These are maps, ancient maps. And by the way, have a look to the borders of town. You will see a much smaller city than what we have now, because the borders of Venice have been changing all the time, and the main island has been enlarging itself through the harbor, through the connection between, for example, nearby San Pietro in Castello and Sant'Elena. And then it becomes easier for those who draw these big maps to concentrate on the island and to take away the role of the other little islands. You see, the more recent a map is, the more detailed a map is, and the less the lagoon is taken into account. One of these has been done with the help of Dürer and the famous De Barbari map. But we are not looking for the most famous, we are just looking for the way the city represents itself. So, this is the moment in which tourism starts being important. Because actually, during the 19th century, Venice had lost its independence, and it started being like a place with no way to survive unless by depending on another state. Austria, the Austrian Empire before, and then the unified Italian state. So Venice somehow invented the tourism, or the kind of tourism that takes the town as the starting point, and not the countryside, the seaside, the mountains. So a kind of tourism which is not based on nature, but that is based on the observation of history, what has been and what is not real anymore somehow. You see the architecture, but you can only imagine what this architecture were meant for. And so little by little we go on, and still we have the attention on the lagoon. Here we see the darker patch is Venice itself, and the other parts are the entire lagoon. For the first time we see the lagoon taken in a realistic way, as it is, and not as a circle. And not by chance, this is a map that comes from the war. In 1915, in 1849, there was a plan to arrive to Venice and to destroy Venice. But then also in 1915, there was a plan to bomb Venice, and actually Venice was bombed in several places. And then in the Second World War, once again there were bunkers built in concrete. One of them was in front of Theatre La Fenice, but another one is nearby here at the Arsenale. And so it's interesting to understand that the consideration for the lagoon was always meant to be partially for the civil and everyday necessities, but partially also for the war, to defend Venice or to attack Venice. Knowing the territory was, of course, really necessary in terms of how to conquer the town or how to defend the town. And if we go on, we see, this is really the first touristic map. You see the Palazzo Ducale at the basis of the map itself, which means that we at last have a town that sort of abdicates, stops being a town and starts being a place just to be visited. And I wanted to reach this last image that shows you how the borders of the town itself have been changing, because of course you had, and we have still up to now, this economy based on tourism, but the other way to have an economy is to base it on the harbor, and of course there was the necessity at a certain point to have a good harbor, and still we have to go on building new parts of the harbor. So if you look at that red fork, that was the image of a possibility that was never developed, because now that same structure goes down where you have the first fork, nearby Santa Marta, nearby the eastern part of the town. So they were still deciding where to put the biggest area of the harbor, and they are still deciding where to do something similar, whether in Marghera or somewhere else nearby. So it's really interesting how all this territory that looks like done by the nature is not done by nature. It has been done half by the nature and half by the man. And so let's say that the lagoon is a place that is unstable. The destiny of the lagoon is either to be filled with water completely or to be filled with earth completely. So in order to keep the lagoon as it is, since centuries, Venetians have been working hard to construct artificial areas. And the first thing that was done was to deviate two rivers that were pushing water inside the lagoon, and but they were also pushing earth inside the lagoon. So in the 15th century started a process according to which the lagoon was preserved and was not filled by the earth. And then the other problem was the water. So the other problem was not to have too much water coming from the sea inside the lagoon. So that's why up to now we have a number of structures. If you go to the Lido, you can see the murazzi. Murazzi means big walls that break the waves, so that the waves of the sea are not too strong and they do not invade the Lido itself. But also, the most expensive and important public work that has been done in Italy during the last 50 years is the so-called Mose. Of course, this comes after Moses, the one who opened the sea. And what is the Mose for? Which never ended, and it will end, but who knows when. The Mose is meant to create an artificial wall that can come up in a vertical position and then go down in an horizontal position, so that for a while, meaning 3-4 hours, the water can stay at a lower level than the level of the sea. And this is against the increasingly strong high waters that Venice has been suffering basically during the last 2 centuries. Not that the high water was never seen before, but during the last 2 centuries we have this increasingly dramatic arrival of waters, of high waters, also during periods in which they are not waited for. I mean, people do not wait for that to happen in April. They used to happen just during the fall with a certain kind of wind, and now they're happening all the time from the 70s, 60s on. So this is another kind of intervention, of human intervention in the lagoon. And actually, the majority of the people that were involved in creating the mosaic have been then put in jail or have been accused of a misleading of the money, of the public money. But this is something that is not new. I mean, we should understand that this is the way Venice has always tried to protect itself with a lot of money dedicated to the sea. And not by chance, we have this ceremony that repeats itself in a very folkloristic way, if you want, but has a very deep meaning, which is the marriage between Venice and the sea, and the Duke of the authorities of the town put a ring, throw a ring in the water, and then, of course, the ring is kept away immediately. But this is the way Venice knows that it has to sacrifice some money, some energy, some people also to the sea itself. So all this balance between water and earth, nature and artificial structures has been on one side a way to preserve the place, but it also has been transformed quite quickly in a way to control people. Because of course, if you have one island for black people, one island for young people, one island for those who work the glass, like Murano is, one island for those who work laces, like Burano is. Laces used to be very important because now we have other ways to show our distinction, to use a Bourdieu word, like the kind of computer we have and so on. But once upon a time, laces were really the way you could show other people how rich you were. And then you have another island for constructing hidden boats and hidden weapons and so on and so forth. So having all this system of islands became a way to control people and to have different places with different functions. So let's say that the whole town and the whole lagoon was a panopticon in the Foucauldian sense of the word. On the other hand, we can say that this was also helping the people to have a social protection, because there were places for all prostitutes, there were places for orphans, to teach orphans to sing or to play, so to give them a job, whether they were male or female. There were places to give people a certain kind of protection in case they had their houses burned. I mean, the social state was not invented in Sweden. It was invented. I can say that Venice was really, really modern in helping the people to survive. And this was a way to control also, because the less poor people you had, and the less violent you need to be, the less danger the town would go through. although the laws were very, very tough. For example, prostitution was allowed, but it was not allowed to abuse, even if he was paid, the family was paid, a little boy. So in case a man was found abusing a little boy, he was literally divided in four. His body was divided in four, with 4 horses, and the pieces, 4 pieces of the body were shown on top of the columns that you can find in Piazza San Marco. So the social control was very, very tough. People had the possibility to behave well, let's say, because also an old prostitute had the means, was given the means to survive by the state. But you should not go behind a certain level of abuse of your freedom. And so what can we learn by the way Venice has been treating the lagoon? First of all, we cannot but understand or underline that it has been abandoned. It is not a way that functions anymore. It happened with the lagoon, the same that happened with the old walls all around the towns. They are not effective anymore. So that's why the big bridge was built, the bridge that goes from Mestre to Venice was built. There was a huge polemics when it was done, but at a certain point it became inevitable to have that bridge. And then, again, when they decided to have not only the train passing by the bridge, but also the cars, there was another polemics. Because of course, the betrayal, part of the Venetian people felt that Venice was going to be betrayed, and the island should have been kept as an island, and the lagoon should have been kept without any other connection with the so-called terra firma. And we still have this memory of not betraying, the necessity of not betraying the lagoon. For example, Le Corbusier should have built a wonderful hospital on the side that looks in the direction of Mestre, and that was modular. I mean, that was meant to be with artificial islands that could arrive to Mestre, more or less. It was like considered to be a flexible structure in a sort of link with the terraferma. And that project was abandoned as soon as Le Corbusier died. Nobody wanted to take it away, to take it and bring it to the end. So nowadays, Venice, that used to have 100 hospitals at least, has a couple of them. And if you really are sick, since 5-6 years, you're meant to go to Mestre. And so somehow, two traditions were betrayed. One tradition was to have many hospitals, and the other tradition was to have new architectures that were meant to be contemporary. Because being so little, Venice continually grew on top of itself. So we have here medieval palazzos, Renaissance palazzos, Baroque palazzos. So up to the 18th century, the contemporary architecture has always been welcome here. And it's just recently that happened that in the direction of honoring Venice as a ruin, the modern architecture has been seen with a certain suspect. It does exist, but if you read all the polemics that has been done about the Ponte di Calatrava or the Fonte dei Tedeschi restored by Reinkolas, you understand that the contemporary architecture is not welcome anymore as it used to be as a tradition here in Venice. So we can learn that, number one, the lagoon is not worthy anymore as it used to be, although it has been the place for the fortune of the place and of the Republic, and also the way to organize an entire social system. And then somehow there is this resistance against those who want to get rid of the lagoon itself, because we have had projects to have an underground, which is actually an underwater, between the Giudecca and the main island, or between the airport and the main island. And all these projects have been cancelled, erased, because they are in the direction of betraying the lagoon. So we have these two tendencies. On one hand, the lagoon wants to be more and more linked to the terraferma. On the other hand, and the lagoon tries to stay like in an unconscious way. Venetian people try to keep the existence of the lagoon, although they are going away. Young people from Venice are suffering from the lack of cars, are suffering from the lack of all the commodities of the terraferma. So somehow Venice is destined now to keep its memory of the lagoon, to keep its lagoon, but these will become more and more a touristic attraction. We can avoid this only by linking more and more the town, the island, the main island, to the other areas, which is not only Mestre, but also on the side of the airport, Zelarino and other little villages that are really important for the economy of Venice. And we should think of Venice like a lamp that breathes. So every day, a lot of people is taken inside Venice, the main island, and every night Venice releases these people that go and sleep on the terraferma. So this breed can go on, and if it does go on, then we will have a city that survives. If this breed stops, and we do not give people the means to come here in a reasonably comfortable way, then this breed will end. And so the problem with Venice is not that Venice is sinking. Venice is sinking, but little by little, and probably sinking not much more than the rest of the Mediterranean. The problem with Venice is that now is high time to link it to the terraferma much more than it used to be, because the lagoon is not an opportunity anymore, it is more and more an obstacle. So it's an opportunity in terms of beauty, biodiversity, possibility to cultivate strange things, like in separated islands, places that are not reached by the chaos of the Anthropocene. Still, if you want the people to live here, we should defeat our unconscious, and we should allow the bridges to come, more bridges to come. And that's all. I'm here if you want to ask me something, at your disposal.
I find it tremendously interesting how you described this thing in Venice in the past, that there were like this number of islands which contained, like, there was an island for orphans, there was an island for prostitutes, and things like these. Thinking that, well, obviously, all these islands and the main island is like Venice. But when you think of like Venice itself, like you have like this main island. So my question is, if we say that, well, Venice, it's not prostitutes, it's not hookers, it's not these little islands, then what is Venice? Like, what used to be? And maybe I'm seeing like a reasoning from this part that maybe now like people are not identifying with these little islands and all the rules because of this like past or something like this. So what used to be Venice? Like, if we say that it's not these islands, then what it is? Like, what was the heart of it?
Venice was a structure to earn money, basically. It was one of the first places where the commercial capitalism started to be just that. I mean, Venice had some territory, conquered some territories in the terraferma to have vegetables and to have meat. But actually, the money Venice had, the great money Venice had, came from Croatia, came from the boats, came from renting big boats to the Pope or whoever, and it came from selling and buying. So that's it. And in order to have all this money and in order to protect the economy, the structure of the power was very, very precise, which means that you had one duke. The duke had to change every 2 years, more or less. The duke was chosen, Doge means duke. The duke was chosen among the richest families. In case you became duke, you had to abandon every interest over your money, so somebody else in your family had to take care of your money. That meant to be honored, but also to lose money in favor of power. And then Venice was meant to be a place where an oligarchy, not an aristocracy, I would say an oligarchy, not the best people, but the richest people would actually control the duke itself. So every very important family would have a duke or 2 or 3 in the time of 1 century, and you can recognize their family names because many of the palazzos lying on the Grand Canal have these names, like Camochenigro, Barbarigo, or Tron. All these names are names of former dukes. And it's very interesting, speaking about the structure of a swamp and the lagoon and Venice itself as a main island, is to say that if, as you see in this map, maybe I hope you can recognize them, Venice is not, even the main island is not one island. It is done out of many insulae, what we call insulae, after Latin term. And every insula had one noble family and one church looking after the other people, so that everybody was observed, everybody would pay the right amount of taxes, everybody would be checked in their personal behavior. So in terms of class distribution, there was not a place for rich people and another place for poor people. You had rich and poor people all mixed up, and every insula was a little sovereign, if you want. And everything was done by the church and by the government together with the aim to protect the economy of the town itself. So it's true that Catholicism was very, very strong here, but it's also true that it was autonomous by other, by Rome. So the Pope was not so strong here, and not by chance the bishop is called Patriarcha, has a different name here. And this is something that happens only in Milan. I mean, in Milan you also call him bishop, but then you have another calendar. So, for example, Carnival happens in a different week. It's longer, in Milan it's not. So, in Italy you had two places where the church from Rome was not that important, and it was a little bit autonomous. And they were Milan and Venice. And why this? Because the two of them were giving money, using money in a tricky way from a Catholic point of view. So the two towns were allocated by the Pope to rent money, to make money out of money, to do all those things that actually reading the Bible, reading the sacred texts, you should not be allowed to do. So all this has to do with the proto-capitalistic economy, which was commercial at the very beginning, and then it became industrial. There was an industrial dream in Venice that took place at the Giudecca, that took place then in Marghera, and we had an enormous development during the 30s of the chemical industries in Marghera, but that was not probably a good idea, because it lasted only 60 years, 50 years. I mean, Venice is not the right place to pollute the sea and to create an industry. But in those days, and during the 30s, it seems that there was no way out to give the job to people. Although the same person, the Conte Volpi, was like strategic to recreate Venice, he was a close friend of Mussolini, decided to have industry in Marghera, tourism in the main island, and a certain kind of glamour at the Lido. And so he developed, founded and developed the cinema festival linked to the Venice Biennial. It's fascinating to follow all the strategies that Venice has had to survive. And I think that I can say that this is the moment in which Venice has less strategies. It always had like clear ideas about what it could become. And now we are navigating like without bricolas. It's a pity if we end by being stuck in the mud, metaphorically of course.
What do you think about the new project or the ideas of the industrial port in Marghera with the Monte Singhia area owned by Eni, or the Canale dei Petroli? I noticed they were that like last week they finished the dredging of the lagoon.
Well, this is a highly instrumentalized topic. The director of the former director of the harbor kept saying that he needed to have big navvies to come in order to have another economy, because of course Venice cannot rely on the one and only culture of tourism. There is a second culture that came up after the 20s, which is the economy of culture in terms of education. So we have many universities, Ca' Foscari, Iuav, but also Venice International Universities and other summer schools linked to international universities. And so let's say that the industry of education, and we can include the biennial somehow within all that, is another way to give job to people and to have young people to live here. But still, I think that we can discuss, but we should have technical skills to be clear about the situation. We can discuss whether to enlarge or not the harbor is a good idea, and to enlarge the Canale dei Petroli or not is a good idea. We can discuss where the harbor should be done, but still, I think that it is not a bad idea to do it, because I mean, Venice is a town after all. It is not a ruin. We should not be victim of the romantic 19th century idea, according to which Venice is just witnessing its own past. This is a place where many wonderful things happen. I mean, we have people from Boston and from Lithuania here giving us the possibility to be in this space of freedom, and you cannot have easily that something like that in other areas. So let's think that Venice has the possibility to survive through the so-called creative industries, through the industry of education, cultural activities, but I think that a well-done harbor is not a bad idea. Although it should be respectful of nature. But of course, if you go to Rotterdam, you have a wonderful harbor, and nobody complains about the existence of that harbor. And it all depends on the way you do it. And Marghera, if you look at when you come down with the airplane, was done in a very rough way. It was like not respectful of the place. So actually, what happened to Marghera is that you should simply cover it with a concrete packaging, and then you could not have gardens there somehow. You could not even have gardens because everything is so polluted that it's anti-economical to clean it. So let's not do that mistake again. Let's do an harbor with a good ecological sensibility and the sense of sustainability.
I have a question. Well, thank you for this really amazing presentation and very inspiring for many reasons. But I wanted to ask about the passage from being a city where people, the inhabitants do live a normal life, to the city for the tourism, which happened you mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, in the 18th century. It started, being like that. So what happened at this? Maybe can you elaborate on that passage, focusing on the 18th century, how they conceived the tourism and what was the reason to attract them and to show, because it was the first place to show the historical, cultural heritage, which was not used as something for the citizens of a city, but just to show up, just to be an image. So what happened in the mentality of the people living there in order to introduce this change? Why it is in the 18th century, the 19th century? Sorry.
Well, the passage happened with the first mistake that Venice did was not to believe in the Americas. Actually, Caboto was a general, an admiral, proposed the tube to create a kind of galera, which meant big boat, which could be used to go to the Americas. But the Venetian powers, not only one, but several dukes, said no, that they still relied on the Eastern vocation, the vocation of Venice on the side of the East, which was reasonable in those days. What was not understandable yet is that the Ottoman Empire was becoming more and more diffident. Let's say that it was impossible for, at a certain point it became impossible to go on with the Silk Road for Venice. And the Silk Road was the road of richness for Venice. So this was one mistake. And this happened in the 16th century. Yeah. Then it took like 2 centuries for the town to fall. And we have these, images of the 18th century, from the 18th century, of people, Venetian people, with masks, with colored dresses, and having fun. Actually, they had fun because they had nothing to do. They used to spend their days at the theater or killing each other. Though of course there were a lot of, while the town started to decline, there were fights inside every family. So at a certain point the money was not enough. And maybe with Napoleon, would Napoleon had survived, would Napoleon had succeeded in creating a unified Europe, then maybe Venice could have had a role. But then, being part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, it was very peripheral, being part of the Italian unified nation, it was very peripheral. So it starts being at the center of the world once again now, because we have a good airport, because the idea of nation is not that important anymore. The circulation of money is easier somehow. But what happened in the meanwhile is that, just 1% of the Chinese people are traveling. What will happen when 2% of the Chinese people will be traveling? So we will have an invasion. Venice can have an invasion of tourism, and it should be like, should become much more. It should free itself from a certain rhetoric of being like the ruin, the place for decadence, the place for a certain romantic way of being. That image came out of Byron or Ruskin or people from the 19th century that had no real love for Venice. They came here with like dishes and forks and sheets because they didn't believe it was possible to buy all this stuff here, because the area was conceived to be beautiful but like damned. Even worse than Naples. So there has been 1 century in which Venice has been famous but abandoned. And that is like the time in which the idea of nation was stronger. Now we are losing little by little the idea of nation. And we think much more in terms of towns than in terms of nations. I think to New York, I think to Shanghai, I think to Stockholm, I think it's changing. So maybe if Venice knows how to recreate itself, it could have a destiny which is different from the Italian destiny. But still, I think that the main problem was not having understood on time that East was a closed road and they had to go west.
or thank you again for the presentation, but at some point in it you said that the destiny of the lagoon was either to be filled with soil or to sink in water. How does that perspective in a way collaborate with your vision and what you said in the end, that actually the island and the main island and mainland should in a way collaborate if the perspective is either to be filled with soil or with water?
Well, I think that we cannot lose the lagoon as it is, and of course we have to adapt it, and the Moses is adapting. I mean, the shape of the lagoon has been changing a lot in the last 20 years, thanks to these concrete blocks that the Moses is bringing in the lagoon in order to protect it. I mean, nowadays the lagoon is an historical monument, so I wouldn't like to lose it. Still, I think that the role of the lagoon in terms of security, in terms of protecting the main island, doesn't make sense anymore. It's becoming a way to suicide the town itself. But still, what we see, what we witness, is that there are basically two doors to enter Venice. One is Piazza Roma, and the other is the Ferrovia, and there is a strong resistance to build other doors. For example, it was not difficult to put the tram, to repristinate, to have the tram back to the area of San Basilio, the area where our university is, because there used to be a tram that was meant to carry goods, not people, goods, from that area of the harbor to the mainland. But they decided not to do it, because at that point you could have had a third door, the town, and so it could have been more difficult to control. It's always a matter of control.
Angela, thank you very much for your lecture.